I noticed that when I was authentic, I made the dearest friends, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But as I said, in general, when you're in groups, when you're on a team, I mean, on my tennis team, people don't always want you to be so you. So now at the age that I am now, I'm finally in a place where I'm like, you know what? First of all, I don't hang around people that don't honor who I am fully.
This is the Own It Show, where we tell stories of how everyday people made ownership theirs.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Rothling-Schofer, and I hope you guys are having an outstanding week wherever you are in the world. And if you guys are new here and this is your first episode, I cannot wait for you to meet our guest today. But if you have been here for a while, you know we've done over 200 episodes. And really what we strive to do at the Own It Show is help you to understand what a life by design looks like, how you can ultimately achieve anything that you're looking to do by simply making different choices and by choosing different. And when we take ownership, when we step into a level of ownership, it opens up a door that quite often has felt locked for a long time. And if that's you, if that's something that you're feeling, and a lot of what we go over today in on today's show, or even some of the past shows, resonates with you, I really invite you to share this, make a comment, or just give it to somebody that you love, because the more that we can speak into people, the more that people can see this content and engage in it, the better chance we have to change the world. So for everybody else, welcome to today's show. Today's guest is outstanding. She has been not only a great friend of Elise and I's, as well as obviously her husband, but it has been a relationship that was really God-driven and God-centered, which has just been so unique. And her husband came out to our couples retreat and spoke at the Couples Collective not a month ago in Costa Rica, which was outstanding. And she's a best-selling author. She is a mom. She is a badass businesswoman. And it has been such a pleasure to get to know her. So I cannot wait to share her with you. KATHRYN Gordon, welcome to the Own It Show.
Oh, thanks for having me. That's a heck of an introduction. Thanks for having me, Justin.
I'll just follow you around everywhere and I'll intro you that way.
Yeah, I love it. I love that.
Perfect. KATHRYN, I love just how our relationship has kind of started just over a year ago, really on a boat out in California. And ever since we first connected, what I was just so drawn to was your energy and the way that you show up and the smile on your face and just the way that you approach life. And I think a lot of people, especially in business, it sometimes feels like life is just a drag and it's been dragging them down. And I'd love to kind of understand where that joyfulness, that love for life just kind of comes from.
Okay. So, I have to tell you, so what you're seeing is really my authenticity, right? The real me. That didn't always serve me. Being the way that I am when I was younger and in certain groups did not serve me, because in general, groups of people kind of want you to go with the crowd. And for some reason, I was always standing out, right? Whether I liked it or not. But I couldn't do it any other way. It's just the way I am. And I think maybe I became this way because I was a Navy brat, meaning my father was military and I went to 5 different elementary schools in the middle of the school year. And it was really sink or swim, literally. Like I would get thrown in and I had to figure out how to navigate my way. And so I noticed that when I was authentic, I made the dearest friends, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But as I said, in general, when you're in groups, when you're on a team, I mean, on my tennis team, people don't always want you to be so you. So now at the age that I am now, I'm finally in a place where
the ripe age of 37.
Yes. Yeah. Where I'm like, you know what? First of all, I don't hang around people that don't honor who I am fully. But yeah, it's just a part of who I am. And it's actually why I started my podcast, which you're going to be on, called KATHRYN for Real, because I just am real. I say it like it is. I say what I think. And you know what? So I realized it'd be really great for me to get on a show and be able to find out what other people's realness is all about.
I love that.
So I used it as a gift. Yeah.
I love that. And to be honest with you guys, as you're listening, a lot of sometimes I think what you see on podcasts, what you see on radio shows, what you see on social media, there's such a facade put up. There's such a filter on everything. And I can't tell you how many times I'm sure, KATHRYN, you've got story after story after story like this, but as I've kind of come up in this world and started to get exposed to more and more people, what I see on social media versus what I actually see in real life is so very different. And of course, I think that is just something that I extremely value in you, but also something that as listeners, you guys can take from this and know that true authenticity, true vulnerability that isn't put on for a show, but is actually there to work through, to teach people, to execute off of, to learn from, is so valuable and so precious. And I just think you've done an outstanding job of it. And it's just really you are somebody that people should actually learn from in how to do that well.
Thank you. I got to share this with you. I just had my brother-in-law on the show, John's brother. A lot of people don't even know John has a brother. And so he was an actor. He has the whole story. He's a New Yorker through and through. He'll never move down to Florida as much as we try to convince him. And and he was an actor. He was your typical actor in New York City, bartending. And what he shared with me, I think just sums it up in terms of what we're talking about right now with authenticity, is he said when he was acting, his agent said to him, "Are you going to be a stand-in or a standout?"
That's good.
The stand-in comes, they act out the part in the rain. They're the ones that are, going through all the different weather type things, or just weathering all of the uncomfortable things that go along with filming a movie or a commercial. But then they stand out, the star steps in and does their thing. So what are you going to be? And I really love that analogy. I thought, wow, that would be such a good thing to share with kids, is what are you going to be? Because we all want to be the star, in other words, right? So to make it look like that, or to phrase it in a way for kids or even adults that, it's not a bad thing to stand out. It's a good thing. Yeah. So I love that.
Oh man, that's a great one-liner, and I've got it highlighted here. And I think everybody out there can resonate with that, because no matter who I talk to, what season of life they're in, how old they are, male, female, entrepreneur or not, everybody, I think, at a certain point feels like they stand out and all they want to do is really blend in. And they feel like they're different. They're like, I don't fit in. I don't belong here. There's something different about me. But instead, if we can take ownership of that, if we can lean in and truly own the ability to stand out, it allows us to lean into that God-given gift that we were meant to stand out with.
That's exactly right. I love that. That sums it up.
It's beautiful. As you kind of have gone through this, and I've got obviously a little bit of background and have a relationship with you that kind of allows me to understand your journey as a mother and really raising your kids and being the wife to John Gordon, who has published 28 books and has sold millions and millions of copies and is renowned for his speaking. I'd love to understand your journey in taking ownership as to who you were and stepping up in not only your role as a mother, but now taking it into relationship grip and helping people through their relationships and becoming a coach and being a speaker and getting on stages and really taking ownership of who you are and the greatness that's inside of you and taking a powerful step in there when it would have been so easy just to continue to blend in?
This is such a great question. And I'm going to tell you something. The answer that I'm going to give you is not going to be what you really expect, but hear me out. So I have a strong personality, obviously, and my husband has a strong personality. And when we got together, we were both in Atlanta. We were young and movers and shakers, and we were going to all the events, and there was so much happening. John had his own nonprofit at 24 years old, and I was actually an actor, so I was doing a bunch of stuff on my end. And we were together. We weren't married yet, but we were engaged and almost about to be married. Our wedding date was coming up. And one particular night, we were getting ready for this event. And it was really kind of a power struggle. Like, which event, we had two events. Which event was more important? Which one were we going to show up at? And one, of course, was my event that I needed to go to, and one was his. And I sat there that night and I realized, okay, I have two choices. If I want to be an actress and I really want to do this, as a career, I'm going to have to probably pack it up and move to Los Angeles and drag John along with me if he would come. Or I'm going to have to decide that I'm going to get behind him and I'm going to lift him up and I'm going to support him. And that's what I'm going to do for us in that season. And then I'll revisit my own desires later on. And I know that goes against everything we're told as women and, where we are right now. And I was such a strong woman that I have to tell you, I didn't ever think that I would make the decision I made. My mother was an immigrant, so to speak. She was from Newfoundland, Canada. She had a 7th grade education. She came over to the States to actually be a nanny for a family. And when she met my dad and married him, it was a volatile relationship. They're both amazing people, but they were alcoholics. And I watched as my mother endured abuse, and she wasn't able to go. There were times I would say to her, "Why are you staying?" And she would say, "Where am I going to go? I have nothing. I have no money." And so for me, my biggest thing was I will never, ever, ever allow myself to be in a situation where somebody has this much control and power and that I have to stay. So that was like my biggest thing was security. So here I am in this situation with John where I'm deciding that when we get married, I'm going to get behind him. It was definitely a leap of faith. It was definitely a risk, but I did it. And I'm not telling you that it was easy. We wrote about it in my book, right? I mean, there were all kinds of struggles. There was some infidelity. There was a lot going on. There was some serious health issues. I had black mold in my implants that almost killed me. But ultimately, I was there and I was behind him, driving him. When he first started speaking, I was the one that was on the phone calling people and trying to drum up excitement for this guy that was coming into town and, going to Iowa. Like, you got to book him because if you don't, there's someone else that wants that date. Meanwhile, nobody wanted that date. But I would do that. Yeah. And, when we opened a restaurant called Moe's Southwest Grill. It's a franchise here. And so I would do the back end stuff. And so I was always kind of behind the scenes doing things. Now, but what I have to tell you is one thing that John did for me, and he didn't do it for me, it was just the way he was. Very early on, I controlled all the money. Like, I just did. And for me, he doesn't like it. He doesn't like dealing with it. That's not part of what he likes, to make the money. He don't want to deal with it. And so I had control of the money. And so I think because there was such a trust a trust factor on both sides, it wasn't an issue for me. I think listen, to this day, I just went out to lunch with some girlfriends, and there are women that have been married. One woman literally has been married 30 years, and her husband monitors her and gives her an allowance, and it's a very volatile situation. And it just shocks me that people are in that. Anyway, my point with all that is I definitely took a risk in lifting John up, but we're on the other side of it. And so, yeah, I'm married to this guy that's John Gordon, 28 books, but I have to say he has pushed me out there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, listen, he'll do whatever. I mean, people will ask him to speak all the time, but it's always about like, hey, actually, this one's good for KATHRYN. He's always trying to encourage me to get out there. There are times when I'm like, oh, I don't know. And he's like, yes, you're 10 times better than I was when I started. Go. So he definitely encourages that. And so it's been a good thing, right? I mean, it could have turned out not so good, but I would have probably known that, way early on. But, and so him being John Gordon, I'm not John Gordon. Right. I mean, he's just on an island of his own. So, I have to be me, which is that whole authentic. Now, are there times where I feel insecure? Are there times, oh my gosh, I mean, this, as I started speaking, I had a situation where it didn't go so well. I didn't want to I was like, oh, this is awful. And John was behind me going, you are not quitting. You keep going. And by doing that, I ended up getting to the other side of that. And it's been great. Does that make sense? So again, all of that is probably different than what you thought I was going to say, because I did not take a very modern approach. It was very conventional in that I stepped back. And as much as I like to shine, I let him shine. But now it's paid off. So
I think I wasn't expecting any answer really. I think what it kind of comes around to that in like this beautiful nature is that when you look at it and you really start to kind of break it down, it all comes back to the strength of your relationship and the ownership that you guys both took in the season of life that you were in, but also in, you use these words, lifting him up while him also now lifting you up. And it's almost like this buoy system where you guys can continue to play in the deep end because you always know that one of the other person is going to continue to lift the other person up. And when you're playing in the deep end, that's when life is fun. That's when life is adventurous. That's when life is abundant. And it requires us to be there. It requires us to get uncomfortable, and we're going to start to drift underneath sometimes, but you've got the other person to pull you up. And so as you talk about this and obviously talking about ownership and what ownership's all about, I'd love you to kind of break down and lean into the development of that relationship a little bit. What have you guys done that's really made it work? What have you guys been through that you've had to learn from? And what are you guys working on that it still gives those like little hiccups?
That's perfect. You know why? Because it's grit. It's the GRIT, which is a word in the title of my book. And I'll go through it with you because it answers all those questions. The first thing is that we brought God into our relationship, and that's the G. And it wasn't always like that. I won't share all of that, but like I said early on, there was some infidelity and we weren't going to be together. And so there was a fight for our relationship. And in that, John actually came up with a prayer. And it's a prayer that we still say today. And it's, God, we invite you into our marriage and family to love us, to heal us, to unite us, to strengthen us, so we can grow strong together and serve you together and raise children that glorify and honor you. And so things really, really changed for us when we brought God into our relationship. And we didn't always have that. So that's the part that we didn't have. And then the next letter is R, which is resolve. And so in that, and in the fight for our relationship, we had to resolve to stay together and work things out, because so many times, it just seems easier to give up, easier to walk away. But you have to fight for it. You have to really resolve that you're going to stay in it and work on it. And we had to do that many different times. I mean, there were times that, living with this man, he's an entrepreneur, and there were times that we made money, and there were times where we did not know when we were, how we were going to pay our bills. And so, there had to be some resolve in that. And then the I is invest. And there were times throughout our relationship, John did not invest in the relationship. He was very self-centered, very narcissistic. I'll give that term loosely. It was all about him. And so I had to kind of remind him like, hey, so it wasn't like it was perfect the whole way through. There were always ups and downs and always struggles. But in the end, we were just talking about this. So with the invest part, I'm doing this talk for a different group. And so part of the invest, I'm going to tell you one time when he invested in me, because it's kind of funny. So, my story that I went to jail 3 times, right?
Yes.
So one of the invest, John had just spoke to all these principals, New York City's principals and administrators for the New York City school departments. So we're in New York City. We get to LaGuardia, and John actually has to go to like Kansas City to go speak, and I was going to go home. And I'm going through the security, and my bag goes off. Something goes off, and the guy pulls out this thing, and he's like, "What is this?" Well, he opens it up and presses the button, and it was a taser, and it sounded like machine guns. Like everybody starts screaming. So next thing you know, I'm handcuffed and being, taken down underneath LaGuardia Airport, thrown into a van. I literally had like this teeny tiny mini dress on with these little Tory Burch sandals. I mean, it was just like, but they did not care. I mean, there was no mercy, no grace. So my point with all that is so right before they handcuffed me, I had my phone in my hand. I called John. I'm like, John, I just need to let you know I'm getting ready to get arrested. I had my taser and my carry-on, but I'm going to be okay. I just want you to know, go ahead and go, and I'll call you when I'm done with this. Well, thank gosh, he did not listen to me, because normally he probably would have got on the plane. And so I talk about the fact that really that was him investing in me, so to speak, right? He had to call this company and say, I can't come talk today. I can't give you a talk because I have to get my wife out of jail. And so, yeah. So that's his big invest. That's him investing in me. But anyway, so you have to invest in your relationship, and, you can't always be a consumer. You can't always be take. It really has to be giving as much as you're, taking. And so, or more than you're taking, I should say. And then the last one, T, which you kind of spoke on earlier, which was there's an ebb and flow. And so T is together. And I also like to say T is for team. But you have to want to do it together, but it doesn't mean that you're doing it equally. It doesn't have to be equal. Well, you're doing this much, so I'm doing this much. I mean, there are times when you are going to give more than your spouse, or they're going to give more to you. That's just the way it is. It's an ebb and flow. But as long as you do want to do it together and you're on the same team, you're going to work it out. You're going to win, and you're going to have a great relationship.
I love it. It's so nice when you have a acronym that you can go off of, and something that you can kind of just have these quick reminders, because I think oftentimes anytime we're in a relationship, and it's easy when things are going well. It's easy when there's low intensity situations and you're having an argument about who's taking the garbage out. But then there's escalations as to like, when you're running businesses together, when you're raising kids together, when you're traveling and something goes awry, how do you deal with that? And being able to look and go, hey, how are we putting God in this? What are we doing to ultimately have some level of resolve over this? How are we investing in one another? And how are we doing this together, working as a team? I think there's that like just an amazing simplicity to that, but also a massive impact that ultimately makes in creating a true steadfast relationship that is prosperous and truly serving to both parties.
It really is. I'm telling you, I have found this GRIT acronym works with all relationships. I just spoke at a women's business conference, and you can apply it to businesses. I mean, you can apply it to employees. Now the God part can get a little wonky, so you might need to be careful on how you come across on that, but it could be higher power. But we all need to believe in something. It's just, we all need to believe in something bigger than ourselves, right? I mean, I say that there are some atheists, and that's a whole other thing. No judgment there. We won't go in that, but yes. So the grit framework, it does apply to all relationships. So that's why I love it. It's been amazing how I've been able to boom. Yes, it goes here. Boom. So simple, GRIT.
How have you been able to incorporate that into how you raise your kids? Because I know, obviously I know both Jade and Cole personally, and Cole, congratulations, just graduated from Clemson this past 2 weekends ago.
This last Thursday, like a week tomorrow. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord.
So awesome. It's so awesome.
I'm just telling you, I was holding my breath. But again, it's the same thing. When I was raising my kids, we were raising our kids, John traveled a lot. So I say but there was we did family meetings where we sat around the table and we would rather do some kind of scripture or just something motivational.
Yeah.
And we always picked our one word for the year. So we'd ask, how's your one word going? We'd talk about that. And it was just a spiritual time for us all to be together. And I'll tell you what, in those meetings, we'd end up finding out more about what was going on with our kids than any other time. So family meetings, huge. And bringing God into it, of course, is important. And then the same with the resolve. Sometimes it's just about resolving to pick your battles. Sometimes my kids were both elite sports players. And so they weren't a lot of help around the house as much as I would have liked, but we were gone. So, we're constantly traveling. For practices. And that being a professional athlete, what that was probably like. And so, but it was about resolving and really just deciding what was the most important thing to have them do or for us to do as a family. And then the invest part, which again is the same thing. Were there things that I always did when I was raising my kids. And one was at night, I would always pray with them before they went to bed. I was the parent that always wanted to drive them to practices if I could, because I heard so much that I would not hear with my kids and their friends from the back seat. So that was a really good time to find out what was going on in the hood, right, with everybody. And again, I'd say the T is together, of course, but I'd maybe look at it more like in team, and just remembering that we are a team, we are a family unit. And it's funny because my kids actually ended up telling us as they went off to college that they didn't realize just how connected we were as a family from doing all these things until they started to meet other, kids in college and find out that, not all families did the same things we did. And I don't say that in any way like that we're better, because everybody has a different situation. And listen, I grew up with two alcoholic parents that were I was very unsupervised. So, it takes all kinds, but just knowing that grit framework and doing that even with our children, they to this day talk about what a difference. And you know what it is? It's building that foundation.
Yep.
And when you nurture the root, you get the fruit.
Yeah.
And
it's so truly that life by design. It is truly that life by design, doing things on purpose, being extremely intentional.
Intentionally. Yep.
And I can say that about you and John, is that everything that you guys do is so intentional. It is so focused on a purpose and a reason. And obviously, John talks about that in a lot of his books, about the intentionality of how you show up and the connection to what you do, and being in obviously the leadership, the personal development space, but bringing that in and actually living a life of that. It goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning about authenticity and vulnerability, is being completely authentic to what you're also putting out there. As you've put out relationship grit, as John has done his books and his speaking, you guys live it. You guys intentionally put that into your life as well. And you've now realized the fruit of that within your children.
Yep. Yep. It is really wonderful, I'll be honest, to look now and say, okay, that works. Like I could definitely share that with younger couples and younger families, because that was a game changer. And to hear my kids even acknowledging that, like, that it made a difference, makes it, the icing on the cake.
I love it. I love it. So KATHRYN, for somebody who just lives in ownership, and quite honestly, you embody it so well. You and John and the entire Gordon family do that. But what is your definition in a word or a phrase of what's your definition of ownership?
In a word or a phrase, what is my definition of ownership? The word's coming to me, Justin.
It's all right. We'll let it marinate.
The first word that comes is authentic again.
Great.
But I feel like it could be something else. There could be another one. But I think I'm going to go with authentic. If another one pops up, I'll let you know.
All right. Perfect. At the end of the day, it comes back to it is ownership is authenticity, or ownership is authentic. It's being you. It's leaning into what it is that you were called to, leaning into what it is that you were meant to do, and taking responsibility for that. And so I love that. It's a great answer.
Yep.
KATHRYN, where can people find you? Where can people get access to you and your information, whether it's from wanting to have you come speak, whether it's wanting to get access to your books, to some of your resources? I know you have some of those available for our audience, but where can people find more about KATHRYN Gordon?
Yeah, you can get my book, Relationship Grit, on Amazon or all major booksellers. And then my website, KATHRYN for Real. If you go to downloads, I've got some free downloads. I think I've got a free Relationship Grit gratitude journal. And I'm on Instagram at KATHRYN Gordon. It's KATHRYN GORDON.
I love it. And guys, I really encourage you to take advantage of those. KATHRYN and John came, as I mentioned, to our retreat in Costa Rica and did a big workshop on a relationship grit. It was outstanding for all of those that attended. And it really just is a simple foundational tool that you can come back to the fundamentals on and set a solid foundation for which you can step powerfully into your relationship, knowing that it's a big part of ownership. It's a big part of living a life by design, is knowing what you're doing, when you're doing it, and why you're doing it, and living that life of intentionality. And when you have that at its core, it changes everything. And so guys, as you go forward, remember, you have the choice, you have the power to understand whether you want to be the stand in or whether you want to be the stand out. And as you make that decision, as you consciously make that decision, choose everything that you do with a high level of intentionality, because by living that life of design, it just doesn't impact you today. It impacts the generations. It impacts your kids. It impacts your kids' kids, because I guarantee you that the Gordon's children are going to follow in the footsteps of what they have already instilled inside of them. And if you need a framework, if you need to come back to it, it's all about grit. We've heard the grit score and what that's all about, but let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's dive into it and know that, hey, grit stands for God. It stands for resolve, stands for invest, and it stands for together. When we can put all of those things in place in a very intentional way, you can truly live a life that's authentic. You can live a life in ownership. And when we do that, that life by design will ultimately come back and give to us tenfold, knowing that success is different, knowing that each one of you is different, but you're different by design. Let's live a life by design. And we'll see you guys next week.